Okay. It's okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, Keith. Come on in. We're just getting started. Okay. I'm going to do a little intro real quick. We'll be presenting today on Twitter and student engagement and other communication technologies. And presenting today will also be Patrick Lafferty and Keith Krieger. And there's a few of you who I don't know in here. I'm Vince Miller, director of the Ed Tech Center. So glad that you could be here. The topic, Twitter, I won't go into that in real detail right now because Patrick's going to cover some of that for us. But I will reference, up on the screen, I've got something called Twitterfall, which is at twitterfall.com. Anybody can go out there. You don't even need an account. You can just go out there and do searches on, you can go ahead and pull this back. Over on the left, they've got some trends that are popular right now. So if you want to see what's trending on Twitter or do your own custom search, you can plug that in. And if there's a lot of conversation, you'll start to see those tweets that are related to a particular topic scroll across the screen. So if anybody has got a mobile device and you want to send out a tweet, feel free to send it out with the hashtag of the # and then JCCCTBB for Tech Brown Bag, all one word. And if you do that, and you'll see that Patrick just sent one out right here, it will appear in this list. So, and we'll be talking a little bit more about how this might be used. But I did want to just go ahead and introduce that. If you don't know what a hashtag is or Twitter, don't worry, that's coming. So I'm going to go ahead and set this back so that it's in presentation mode, which will get rid of all the other tools on the screen there. What we wanted to do to start out was just show a YouTube video. So we won't be able to watch the Twitterfall while that's going on, but we'll go back to that. Just as kind of a 5-minute intro to the idea of how Twitter might be used in a classroom. And this is in particular more of a lecture type class. So I'm going to go ahead and then just play that, and we can watch that, and then we'll get started with the conversation.
Not familiar with it, but I knew that it was out there. I knew that it was a way that you could use both computer website and text messaging to post comments. I started to think about how I might be able to incorporate this into the actual classroom setting in my big group of 90 students as a way to pull more students into a class discussion that I ordinarily wouldn't be able to do in 50 minutes with that many people.
It's been really exciting because usually in classes like this, you'll have 3 people that talk about the discussion material, and so to actually have 30 or 40 people at a time talking about it is really interesting, and then I can go back to the weekend and send a direct message.
I'm really impressed with all of your posts today. You guys did a great job. I do want to bring us back and talk about what some of the most useful things are that you either saw go up here or things that you talked about in discussion, the posts, or what you read.
Kids are able to get outside of their comfort zones. They're not having to worry about speaking in front of 200 people, 100 people, however many people are in the class. So I think it really helps.
It actually gets the students incorporated into the class and makes them like more and thrive. It gets to get into what's going on and discuss things more.
People need to learn to get their opinion out somehow. And the class of 90 people trying to pipe up and be heard over everyone else can be a little intimidating, but here all you have to do is type it out, hit enter, or send it from your phone, and your opinion's up there for everyone to read.
How you guys doing?
We're gradually losing faith in humanity.
You're gradually losing faith in humanity? Yeah. All right, my work here is done.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're putting stuff that college students are paying for to learn out on the internet, and then college students are researching out on the internet for other people to find. And I'm really big on Wikipedia and the ability for you to find whatever you need to know on the internet, and for us to put more history knowledge out there through intelligent discussion is pretty cool.
The significant terms that we've talked about in our discussions with feedback, and so you can go back on it, and it's a pretty good study to look at what was most important with what we talked about that week.
What I have seen is that nearly everyone participates in some way, either in class on their computers or cell phones, or they do their handwritten comments and give them to the TA, and she posts them after class is over.
I don't have a laptop with me, so I'm using my phone.
If you got 50 minutes, you don't have time to call on every single student. So this allows, for a lot of information to get sent in quickly. And
I think it's actually probably better this way because I know there's some kids where they want to have something to say, but they're a little bit shy or standoffish, so they don't always give it. So this gives a better opportunity for people to still express their views on what's going on and what's being discussed.
140 characters does limit the types of comments that they're able to make and the types of evidence and argument that they're able to make to back up their opinions. And there are some issues that we're discussing in class that do require a more in-depth approach to explaining one's position. But on the other hand, oftentimes there's a lot of miscellaneous information that students think they need to throw in that kind of muddle up the idea that they're trying to portray. So having to keep them limited to 140 characters does require students to get at the absolute kind of central point.
so I think it really forces them to focus.
I was traveling one week, and so the TA led the Twitter discussion in class. But while away in Santa Fe, Mexico, I was able to log on to Twitter during our class period, during our class time, and follow the class discussion from another state. And as much as I could, I contributed as many comments as I could to what I saw the comments being posted on the Twitter board that week. My understanding is that students in class thought that was actually kind of cool. They thought that was pretty exciting, that even though I wasn't here, that I was still kind of participating in the class and giving them feedback on the types of things that they were saying. It was really useful for me too to kind of see how this works from afar. This is a very different format than your typical history discussion or history class format, and I had no idea how it was going to work. I think I remember saying, it's going to be messy, and I'm just going to have to come to grips with the fact that it's going to be messy, but messy doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be bad.
So you can see that we've got a few tweets that have come in there with that hashtag of JCCCTBB, so that's fantastic that we can start to see that scroll. For those of you that had never seen that particular video on YouTube or had thought about that, did that seem like an interesting concept, a way that you might be able to have some kind of feedback from students, behind the lecture in a classroom?
The crowd goes wild.
Send your tweet in with your response. Just kind of curious. The first time I saw that, I thought that was really innovative way to use Twitter in the classroom to try to get those students engaged. One of the reasons that we thought about this topic was that the students, of course, bring a lot of different mobile devices into the classroom, and I've had faculty ask, well, there's a range of possible responses. We could completely ban those devices. We could say nothing about them, or maybe we could try to engage the students somehow around that technology and see if it's something that we could use. So Twitter is one way of doing that, and there's a couple of other things that we'll talk about as well. But Patrick Lafferty, who teaches in the interactive media program, uses Twitter quite a bit with his students. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Patrick.
Hopefully you can hear me now. Hi, I'm Patrick Lafferty. Nice to see you all. Okay, so now you've seen what some of what Twitter can do. And as you can see, as I was just sitting there a moment ago, I responded to one of my students who was asking, when is this happening? Well, right now. So, it's ongoing. But let's take a step back and take a look at what Twitter actually is. Okay. Oh no. we're engaging students with Twitter and other communication technologies, but let's take a look at what it actually is. Twitter Basics, what is it, right? Twitter is a microblog, all right? Now, maybe you're not comfortable with what a blog is in and of itself. A blog is a weblog. It's basically an online diary. Twitter takes that idea and shrinks it down to 140 characters at a time. Okay, so now you can write, you're saying you can write Ulysses on Twitter if you want to, but you're going to use a whole lot of tweets to do it. So we're talking about 140 characters at a time. It limits, as she was saying in the video there, it limits what you can say, but at the same time, it also makes you a better writer. And that's one of the main reasons I like using it in class too, because everyone needs help becoming a better writer. Why does it make you a better writer, you might ask? Because you have to edit yourself. You're perpetually editing every bit down to try and get as much information in there as possible. And I'm not talking about, using 2 letters out of a 7-letter word to communicate your idea. You have to choose a different word. It's going to expand your vocabulary that way as well. So it's a microblog. Now, there are some key operant terms here that we're dealing with. The @ the hash, RT, HT, MT, and DM. Now that may seem like gibberish right now, that's why I'm standing here. I'm going to try and explain that to you. The @ okay? What does the @ do? It allows you to address an individual, okay? So you would @ me. I'm Prof. Lafferty on Twitter, amongst other places. But, so you would say @ Prof. Lafferty, as my student did in that other example. What time is the event going on? It causes tweets to show up as mentions. And that's an internal Twitter term, but basically it means you've been mentioned somewhere. So if someone is talking about you, or if someone is talking to you, then if you put @ that person's name, then they'll show up. And it shows up in their feed as well in a different fashion than if you just said Prof. Lafferty. Without the @ symbol, it's going to be one step more difficult for me to find that you're talking to me or about me. So using the @ addresses it to me, much as an email address would work in the same fashion. Again, and because of that, it greatly increases the chances that your tweet will be noticed, all right? And if you place it at the front of your tweet, this is a feature that many people don't fully grasp at first, at least certainly not in my classroom with my students. I've seen this a lot. But if you put an @ at the front of the tweet, and then the person's name, obviously, so if you say @ Prof. Lafferty, then that is going to only appear to you, the person you're addressing, and then anyone that happens to be following both of you. Okay, so it's more private. It's still going to show up in your public feed, but people are going to have to go looking to see that kind of comment. So you can have a dialogue. If you're having an actual conversation on Twitter, you're not going to be filling someone else's page with all of that conversation unless they happen to be following the 2 of you that are having the conversation. And then to avoid that, it's good to know that if you put any character in front of the @ symbol, but specifically most of the time people use a period, so it is less obtrusive. That removes that feature so that it's not the @ Twitter looks to see if there's an @ at the beginning of a tweet and then makes that, in the scenario I just described, slightly more private. Okay? If there are any questions about this along the way, please feel free to ask. Hashtag. A hashtag is a phrase that is preceded by the pound or hash symbol. So in this case, we're using JCCC-TBB for this event, right? Another big one that's been in the news lately is #OBL for Osama bin Laden. Another one that we use on campus frequently is #JCCC. So if something's going on campus, or you want to know what's going on campus, check out #JCCC. And so this allows for a dispersed conversation between multiple unrelated users, and it brings it all into one location. So there could be, this group here talking about what's going on. We could be using the #JCCC-TBB, but we could also be using the #JCCC. We could be using both. And then people that are looking for what's going on campus today on Twitter can find all that information there, even though they had no idea we were here. And so distributed people, one location. And they're, as I said, they're used for conferences or events, but I personally use them for my classes. So I've got a #SIM130, 200, 270, 273. And that allows my students, as you saw in that video as well, to organize the information. And so if they need to go back and see what was that link that he sent 2 days ago, they can click on the hashtag and it should be there. It also allows me to let my other non-student followers know when I'm talking to my class first. So if I put a hashtag at the front that says, #SIM130, that lets other users that are perhaps just skimming their feed and trying not to, read a bunch of things that aren't related to them, to see that, okay, he's talking to his class directly. Now, if they've got time, they find me interesting, whatever, they can continue on. But it gives them a signal that says, hey, this is maybe not directly for you. Here's an example. This is what it looks like. And this screen cap is out of a program that I use called Hootsuite. It's a web-based software that lets you tap into Twitter. But you're looking at the hashtag JCCC feed from the last couple days. There's obviously much more there, but you have to fit it anyway. Convenient screenshot. So you see we've got different conversations about very different topics. So we've got the Kansas City Star mentioned, we've got athletics, Office of Diversity, and a guy with a page boy haircut, right? So you get all kinds of different conversation in this one location, but it's all JCC centric. Now, the RT, all right? Again, a lot of confusion about this. What does that mean? Retweet, okay? That's what we're talking about with an RT. And it's a way to quote, all right? The RT is specifically a quote. So, for instance, here's an example. Yesterday, I was fortunate to have Ben Smith, who you may or may not know. He's a social media guru of sorts in the area, and really nationally. And he was speaking to my class and was very impressed with the equipment we have in the classroom. So he said, very cool, students in the JCC Interactive Media class have both Mac and PC at every desk. And he took a picture with his phone and tweeted it. This was in the 5 minutes that he was in the room before class started, before he was speaking to us, okay? So you can see this is from the Twitter homepage, and you can see where he tweeted it from. You can see, I can favorite it, I can undo the retweet, because as you see down here, it was retweeted by me and by our departmental account, okay? So retweets start with a tweet. You're not going to quote someone if they haven't said anything in the first place. So this is our jumping off point. From here, our board member, Stephanie Sharp, retweeted what Ben said, and she created a little heart shape there. So meaning she likes it in online speak. So she's happy about that, retweeted it out to all of her followers, and so then we're off the races. She retweeted it, she put exactly what Ben had said afterwards, right? So that's how that works. It's a direct quote. Now, Ben, in response to that, very fortunately for me, because I'm presenting today, said a very nice thing about me. And so he, was talking to Stephanie and said, great stuff happening in my program, kudos to me and my colleagues. So the conversation continues after that quotation, right? And then it shows you down here at the bottom of the screen, this was the people that are mentioned in it. So I'm up there, Stephanie's up there, okay? And then again, this is how the conversation works. From our departmental account, I retweeted that because you want to put out positive things that are being said about you, and it's not improper to retweet that as well. So I said, thanks, there you go. And so that is how the retweet cycle works. It all starts with somebody saying something, and then other people quoting them properly. But now how do you make yourself retweetable, okay? So in order to do that, you have to edit your tweet. And you have to make sure that it is below 140 characters. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand too. Because if you want to retweet, if you want to be retweeted, you need to save room to say RT, whatever your name is. And this brings up other issues like don't have a very long name. If you've got a very long Twitter handle, it's going to be harder for you to write and be retweeted. And this is how the Twitter ecosystem works. That's how you feed each other by retweeting each other. And that's how you build things like clout and impact scores online. So how do you do that? You take 140, which is the character limit for a tweet, and subtract 5, which is RT space at. And so 140 minus 5 and the number of letters in your Twitter name. And that equals your RT saved tweet, okay? So in my case, 140 minus 5 plus 12, Prof. Lafferty's 12, equals 123. So if I write anything beyond 123 characters, I run the risk of having my words edited before they're retweeted. Okay. Now, what is HT? HT is known as hat tip or heard through. Okay. So, what does that mean? Well, let me show you. For instance, I didn't actually retweet this. Okay. This is my sister. She volunteered to be an example here. HT you don't see nearly as often. But I told she's a huge Harry Potter fan. I saw a tweet the other night in reference to the Bin Laden situation and told her about it, but I didn't actually retweet it, and she didn't see it on Twitter. As a result of that, she said HT at Prof. Lafferty. She heard it through me. okay? And that's how you note that, okay? So it's not, she's giving credit where there was otherwise no Twitter back channel to show you where it came from, okay? That's HT, that's less common. MT, more common, and it's a modified tweet. And that's what happens if you want to be technically correct, you want to avoid notions of plagiarism or impure journalism or anything like that that may come up. You want to use MT when you're changing things. So, for instance, ProPublica tweeted something about Obama banishing a reporter from the press pool. Now, as it turns out, the link there is incorrect. It doesn't go to the article they intended it to, okay? Which we discovered in their next tweet where they say, link fixed, blah, 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 right? The rest of the point. So from that point, so we've got two tweets that have the information that I wanted to retweet. I put the two together. Okay, so I took their original tweet, which I thought was a stronger phrasing of the point, and put the correct link in there, right? But that's not a tweet that existed anywhere, right? So because of that, I used MT and added my own comment at the beginning, which is also a possibility with that. Okay, so MT modified tweet. If you change really anything, then you need to be using modified tweet to be, shall we say, polite in Twitter society. And then DM, and I don't have any fancy visual for you for DM, is a direct message. That's a behind the scenes tweet. Now, the rule of thumb is always, if you write it online, odds are it can make it into the public's knowledge, domain, whatever you want to call it. But DM puts it behind a curtain that lets you communicate with your followers. You both have to be following each other, and it's just a way to communicate it's the most private option Twitter has to offer, okay? It's akin to email, but it is not as secure as that, obviously. So, questions about any of that? Yeah.
Would DM be picked up in Hootsuite?
Yeah, you can manage your DMs in Hootsuite, but what do you mean picked up?
Like if I did a DM and somebody else was looking at Hootsuite, would it pick it up?
Again, if you and I were following each other and you DM'd me, then it would show up in my Hootsuite feed, but that would not be available to the public. That's only available to me. Yes, right. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, so that's Twitter in a nutshell, and a very small nutshell. There's obviously, I could go into much more detail if necessary, but that's the bulk of it. Now, what does that mean for the classroom though? And as you saw in that video, using cell phones in class can be valuable, but you want to do it in a way, let me get out of this so I can move the feed again. So if I had this going the whole time behind me, and my classes, I should mention, my classes are limited to 15 seats. So I don't have 90-person classes. I don't have the 500-person, 1,000-person classes you get at KU. So the advantage of this isn't the same for me in the classroom. But the use of hashtags for me allows me to extend my classroom beyond the walls, right? And it makes it an asynchronous learning environment. You don't have to be there learning with me at the same time as me in order to take the knowledge away from the class, right? So different advantages for different environments. But I still think this is great. And for a big lecture hall, I think this is invaluable because everything that was said in that video is true. There are people that just don't want to talk, regardless whether they're in a group of 8 or a group of 100 or 1,000. They're not going to want to talk. And this gives them an opportunity to share their information and to ask their questions in a quote-unquote safe environment. Yeah, albeit they're in front of the eyes of the entire world this way, but it's safer for them. The perception is safety there, so it gets them out of their shell. Questions about that?
So you've got the hashtags up there, Patrick, for all of your different classes that you teach, the Sim 130, et cetera. So how do your students break down in terms of their preference for communicating with you via Twitter versus, say, email?
Almost all of them go with Twitter over email. Yeah. To the point where it can be sometimes a little frustrating where they're saying, can you send me a grade report? And I can't do that through Twitter. So then I have to switch medium over to, to the email. Yeah, there does seem to be a big preference for that. Yeah. As much as any of them talk to me at all. But yes, there is. That's the classic problems don't go away with the new technology.
For online classes, we're obviously removed from each other physically, so you're not sitting in the same room. So I can see an application, but would you be able to do something like this where they could post at different times?
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
if you had class from 8 to 10, and they log in at midnight or whatever.
Yeah.
How would you keep the class going, or what, how would you
Well,
do
the
that?
conversation keeps itself going within the hashtag. Now, it's better. I'll go along with that and say it's better when people are doing it synchronously. If there was a conversation going on right now behind us, that would be a richer experience probably. But it is still a great reference point for students who missed that conversation at 8 o'clock to go back at midnight and pick up what people were saying. Or if you couldn't attend a conference, you can go back and pick up on the conversation that was going on around the conference and see the links that people were sharing, images, what have you. You know, I can share this Prezi presentation that I just created through Twitter, and then people that couldn't be here can pick up on the information that I just shared with you. You know, if you're teaching online though, using Angel or something like that, there are probably better ways to have behind the scenes conversations, but not necessarily a better way to make that a public experience, right? And that's the other thing that I really like about Twitter, is that you can bring all kinds of voices into the classroom that aren't there and that wouldn't be there. They aren't enrolled. That may be anathema in a, you know, an institution that pays, you have to pay tuition to be a part of, but it's still, I mean, for instance, yesterday I had a guest speaker. He's not normal in my classroom. Why not have a guest in my hashtag, right? So, you know, it's a different concept, but it makes it a more public learning experience. Anything else? I know I went very quickly, but there's a lot of information there. And again, this is available at interactive.jccc.edu/Lafferty. And you can check it out yourself there. But so that's a reference point. There are all kinds of Twitter cheats out there, different ways to find what you're looking for. If you sign up for an account today and you've never done it before, and you say, "Wow, I love pastry chefs. Where do I find pastry chefs on Twitter?" There are tools like Twello.com, and you know, with that you can it's the Twitter Yellow Pages, right? And so you can go and look for pastry chefs on there, or you can Google pastry chefs on Twitter and find what you're looking for. It's not much different than finding things, whatever you're looking for on the regular internet, the full internet. So, yeah, but I strongly encourage you to dive in head first. It won't get you. And the difference between Twitter, I always mention this when I talk about Twitter, between Twitter and Facebook, is that Twitter is a binary situation. You're either public or private. Facebook, you're on quicksand. And so, you know, you never know when you wake up in the morning whether your stuff is going to be private or public. So it's a safer, I'll say that, you know, relatively, but it is a safer environment than Facebook is as far as your privacy is concerned. With that Facebook gig. Anything else? Vince, throw it back to you.
Yeah, I think people, are you ready to go on? Sure, you've got a little bit more time here if you've got something else you'd like to expound upon.
Anything that needs expansion, yes.
I would just ask the question, have you or has anybody ever been to a conference with a speaker and they've had the tweets going on with Twitter, what they call Twitter back channel, so people are commenting from a bigger audience? And if so, I have not, I've just seen videos. If so, how do you think that works?
Sometimes works very well, and sometimes it works incredibly ethically disastrously.
Because someone hijacks the feed, or
Well,
what?
because the one where I saw it turn into a big train wreck was at WebPO Expo. Huge conference in New York. And they got a speaker in from, you know, a researcher from Microsoft who got up on the stage with paper on a podium. And as soon as she stepped up on the stage, they had the speech playing in the background, and somebody tweeted saying, "Oh, look, we're having a speech from Google Microsoft," or something like that. You know, it's got a giggle out of it. She can't see why people are giggling.
Oh boy.
She can tell people are giggling, right? And then as she started, that started the energy going downhill. So she started getting more and more nervous as she was speaking, and people were tweeting, "Hey, speak up, we can't hear you, work with the audience." You know, she's not getting any of this feedback. It's all going on behind her, and the conference presenters are not getting up to tell her, "Hey, you know, you need to speak up, people can't hear you," whatever. And it just got worse and worse and worse until somebody finally pulled the plug on the feed behind her. And then the very next session, they said, "Okay, we're going to have so-and-so curating the Twitter feed."
That is an important step, the curation,
Yeah.
really. And it's the curation of information, right? And that Twitter is a great tool for that as well.
Well, it was a higher ed web conference, and it was really, I think, done very well, and it pretty much, even during the break, they would have, like, in the lunchroom and everywhere else, and people would, if they really liked class or session, they would tweet about it. It's really, I think people would really pay attention. And as for the guy that was talking, at the conference, people, he actually was talking to my left too. So I think there wasn't as much commenting going on while he was talking because he was such a dynamic speaker, but it wasn't disruptive like in your case.
Yeah. There you go. Vince has been doing some live tweeting of the event here and documenting it for people that aren't here, right? Which is another important role of the curator. And my experience with this has been participating in conferences that I couldn't attend to. So I've been the person throwing barbs, but not to that level. But it's a different experience when you're not there, when you're not in the physical space. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can ask more impertinent questions perhaps than if you were in the room. So yeah. Oh yes, that again, yes, right, and that does happen a lot. There's a lot of reverb in these rooms. So yeah. Anything else? I think so. Yeah.
Nobody's being snarky on the TV yet.
We're waiting for you.
Yeah, I've been up here all.
I'm waiting for my pile on now. Now we'll see. All right, so as we've seen here from Dr. Rankin, from Patrick's approach with Twitter, where it is a tool to engage the audience and start to bring in the audience to participate. Another approach, if we want to think about instructional ways to do this, where we might have challenging subjects, where we might have subjects that are a little bit more difficult to address, where we want to perhaps have an anonymous piece of feedback and making it visible to the class, then the other potential kind of tool that leverages some of this would be some kind of polling tool. It's very, very quick. It can be very, very quick. It can be typically a poll is limited to a single question. It can either be true, false, multiple choice. And what we can do with these tools is feed back to the audience those aggregated results as they happen. So slightly different than what we see going on here, where we're posing a question to the class and then expecting some kind of response from them. The things that you can think about using this in a classroom situation might be within a poll, if we're using a single question, might be to help to focus a discussion or bring a discussion back on track. So we have some kind of group work, and then as a result of that group work, we post a single question poll that then each one of the groups can respond to. Again, anonymous, we can aggregate it. As an instructor, we can use some of these tools to keep the results and start to get and reuse them in other classes potentially, where we can aggregate the results and get a larger group of responses out there. We could use these kinds of things to get evidence of understanding, again, anonymously for those folks, Patrick pointed out, for those folks who are not as forthcoming to speak out in class. A poll gives them that ability to say, yes, I understand the concept, or no, I do not. So evidence of understanding, I think, is one way to do this without other kinds of quizzing methods out there. I could pull items from readings, from discussions, from homework, and again, use that as a tool to see what level of understanding we're doing. Gauge whether or not we need additional questions. Do we need to feed something else back to the class to extend what they're thinking or talking about at the time. And then finally, we can reuse all these. So I might build these for one particular class if I'm teaching multiple sections, and be able to reuse those polls throughout a term. So let's take a look at a couple of these and how you might use those. We'll start with Poll Everywhere, I should say. And all of these tools have a free level of use. That is, you can sign up for free, a limited account, certain number of responses, certain number of surveys, but all of them do have a free account. And like most all of the Web 2.0 stuff, usually the free accounts have some kind of catch involved. Typically, a link in the survey that says, here, come out to our website, or do your own, or get paid for your opinions. So you do have to be somewhat aware of that. So Poll Everywhere says, you ask a question, develop the responses, your audience then gets to respond. So they can do it via smartphones, they can do it on the web, they can do it on regular text. I can embed these inside of PowerPoint so that they have, if I already have PowerPoint going, rather than interrupting context and switching from where I am within that to a poll, I can embed that content right in there. So it'd be interesting, Patrick, if we could drop those into Prezi and see how that works. You can see that there is no sign up is required. If you do sign up, if you do establish an account, that allows you to come back and reuse things. So let's log into the account here. Account sign up will take you a minute or two. Creating a poll is probably a minute or two. So after we've created the account, I have a very simple kind of desktop here. It allows me to see whatever I've created. I see all the polls that I have created, and notice that I can have these downloaded as a PowerPoint or as a PowerPoint 2007-2010 file. So it comes down to me as a slide that I can embed in a presentation. So if I have, this is an existing poll here. The poll is open. You can see the big button over here. I can stop asking for results. And you'll see that if I have to make a conscious choice here, that if I know that my students are using some kind of phone, and they do have a texting plan, and I do allow that kind of thing to happen, they can text answers to these poll questions. Again, anonymous, it's aggregated, it's real time. I can tweet it, one of these codes. I can actually use, if I have a smartphone or I'm on the web or I've got a desktop machine in front of me, I can go out to poll4.com and send one of those codes. And again, real time, single questions, immediate feedback to the audience.
So Keith, is that a real poll that you've had out there?
It's running, yes.
Yep.
It's a real deal.
Gotten a lot of responses.
Yeah, I use this every once in a while. I clear the results every time, so we get to, so everybody gets to have the advantage of seeing it live when it happens. But you can see this is, I can see response history. So if I'm using this across multiple classes, I can start to get an idea of what the responses have been per class, and I can choose how to accept responses. So perhaps if I'm in a computer lab, I can start to say, well, no, I'm not going to do it via text. I don't want cell phones. I can still control how people are able to respond to the poll. And this, of all the polling tools that I've looked at, is the easiest one
to start to pull this stuff into PowerPoint. I don't have to do any fancy embedding. All I have to do is build it, give it a name, and download that slide and insert that slide into an existing presentation. But, oh, there we go. There's download for Prezi. So there is a link in there. So if I am going to push it out elsewhere, to Facebook, to tweet it, to put it on my blog, to email it to people, then I've got that capability as well. So, how many of you have done clicker work in the classroom? Anybody done clicker work here? And you can see this is clickers without the hardware issues. That if I have an internet connection, then I can get the same similar kinds of results to a clicker without having to manage those pieces of hardware and enrolling devices, and doing all those things that I have to work with a clicker. So you can see live with Bob. Same kind of thing as Twitter, but you can see it's a very anonymized kinds of responses.
So Pete, how is that poll delivered? Is it like a tweet, or how does it go out?
Well, it's what we're actually seeing here.
You just put it up on the screen.
Yeah,
and then the students.
Exactly the way we've seen it here.
So they have to know the codes.
Which is why,
displayed
yeah.
on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's, we're saying.
It's a live thing. You're
so
sitting in
anybody
class
that
looking
knows
at
the
it.
codes can.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Which also means that they could be accidentally gained by people that retweet to retweeting to a poll code. And they're not completely anonymous because you can then search for that Twitter stuff.
Yeah. It would take a couple steps to get in.
Also, students could vote multiple times and you wouldn't have any way to know, right?
I will vote with all 50 of my Twitter accounts.
Well, I could text a code. I voted a tweet, but I could do it again through a text, right?
Yes, you could do multiple.
I'm just thinking about it in my classroom.
Oh, sure.
That's fine. If they were that interested, at least they would vote a couple
Yeah,
times.
if they're gonna go to that much trouble, it's like, cool, those are the ones who talk all the time, right? Let's do it 14 times. But you can contrast this to the Twitter content, where this allows, particularly for folks even from that kind of removed piece in Twitter where you're arm's length away from other people, this completely, for the most part, strips out that personal piece to it. So if I have difficult subjects, controversial questions, things that I may not want necessarily to put people on the spot by having those questions out there where they can respond in anonymous ways. And I can turn this off. I can say, okay, poll's over. I click the stop poll button, and everybody who's in is in, and who's not has missed the piece.
If you text more than once, you get a message that says you can't vote anymore on this poll.
Ah.
So,
Yeah.
but I could probably do it through Twitter and
once per-
text.
Once
yeah.
per the 3 different ways.
Well, you could do more than one way through the.
If you had different Twitter accounts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would.
I could
I know.
efficiently automate this because I have tools that allow me to post
Do
things
multiple.
from multiple
Mhm.
Twitter accounts.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You would probably not be our typical student.
probably.
Probably.
I'm not sure what poll you'd take that would have such high stakes issues that that sort of interference would be a problem. But.
Okay, when you sign up for an account, there will be a checkbox that says, I am an educator, which means that if you sign up and check that, you get some things that are not open to folks who do not. Notice that here's our sizing, here's the things that we can do on the free account. So we're not going to be able to see grades, we're not going to see their answers, we can't moderate. We could allow comments in those responses if we choose to do so, then that's why response moderation is possible. But the cost, price is right. This is really, really simple tool that literally 5 minutes of work of content that you're probably asking students already? And how many of us struggle with getting response from that participation? Knowing where and how students are doing it.
Keith, have we looked at doing the campus-wide program there where we do have access to all those tools?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay.
But might be worth something pursuing.
The price seems to be right, free.
Yes. Yes. There's a contact us in there, so
Yeah,
I'm sure,
right, you never know what
I'm
happens.
sure there's I'm sure there's something in there. But that would allow us to do some branding, see things like that. So, thoughts?
I think it's fantastic. I haven't used it before, and I'll definitely be finding a way to work that in.
I guess we should see if anybody's weighing in here. Again, I've used the clickers, and my issue with clickers is that there's that hardware component that you have to manage. Easy to break, easy to lose. Whereas this tool, again, if everybody has something in their hand or in their desktop, they have immediate access to it.
You generated a pretty nice little stream there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Any other questions for Keith? All right, well, I just want to thank Keith and Patrick both for coming in today and talking with us. And thanks everybody else.
Go forth and poll.
Yes.
And tweet.